So I'm Kristopher Stone. I'm the director of Boone County Arboretum. I've been there about 21 years. And Josh Selm is also on our Zoom tonight. He's helping moderate the Zoom presentation. So if you're on there, he'll help out with the chat. So if you have any questions tonight, if you're on Zoom, feel free to put those in the chat room. If you're here with me in person, you can ask me at the end of the presentation. So this is 230 slides. I have given this talk in previous events at the KNLA in Louisville in January and over at the zoo with Brian Hines from Spring Grove. So this is kind of a combination of what has done well at the Arboretum and also done well in our area. I'm going to pull this mic down a little bit further. It's a bit too much, I think. Hopefully that's a little bit better. So, so really it's things that have done well at the Arboretum and also at Spring Grove, kind of a test of two Arboreta, but especially focused on our Arboretum that we have here in town. In fact, it's 5 miles away. So we're going to be talking about landscape tree selection tonight. Also their care. So what it takes for each of these plants to do well in our area. So starting out, I'm going to talk about Abies Normaniana, the Norman fir. We were having quite an issue in our area with lots of evergreen trees that are dying. And so I'm going to go cover some of the evergreens that have done well in our area that should be used in place of Picea pungens, which is Colorado blue spruce. If you don't know what a Colorado blue spruce is, that's the spruce trees that kind of are bluish silver. They're all dying all throughout the area. So they're kind of hard to miss right now. So Norman firs, not the fastest growing of tree, but they have a nice deep green needle color and silvery undersides. So they're quite a nice tree. They get large with time, easily an 80 to 100 foot tall tree, and also maybe 20 to 30 foot wide. So I'm going to mute my watch as well. So as you can see that the silvery undersides to the needles there and dark green upper coloration on the foliage. This is looking up inside a Norman fir at Spring Grove. Here's one out at the Arboretum. This is a young tree, so they are a nice, dense, conical, pyramidal shaped tree. And when they're young, they're very attractive. So you would use them as Christmas trees. Well-drained soil is a must for all firs. You want to make sure if you've got heavy clay soil, if you do a test, dig out the hole before you plant the tree and put in water. If that hole doesn't drain out within about an hour, then your soil is not well drained enough to grow fir. So nice loamy soil is a must for any of the Abies. Moving on, here's another one we've tried for quite a while. This is the golden Spanish fir. This is Abies Pinsapo aria. Kind of a nice slow growing plant. This plant is about 15 years old and only about this tall. When we got it, it was about this tall. So it's very slow growing. Kind of has a hedgehog look to it. So kind of interesting. We always worried that it would be not cold hardy enough because it is a zone 6 plant. But it has not had any trouble with our winter times here. Even this past year, it has not shown any damage from the polar vortex we had in December. Again, you can see this is kind of a scale picture. We've got a 4-foot deer fence around it. And then there's our gator behind it. So it's not a very big plant. So red maples, I'm not a big red maple fan, but there is one that we have at the Arboretum that is quite nice. It's called Autumn Radiance. So that red maple was kind of marketed to have a very thin leaf and a leaf that is kind of translucent. It is the first of our red maples to change fall color every year. We often get leaves changing on this tree towards late September. And so it's very consistent and it lasts a pretty long time. 2 to 3 weeks is not unusual for the coloration to last on this cultivar. And there's that translucent quality that I mentioned. So Ivy-leaved maple, Acer sicifolium. It's kind of a small rounded tree, 20 to 30 foot tall, and kind of has a pleasing form. It's got gray bark and a trifoliate leaf. So it kind of looks like poison ivy to some people. I guess if you use your imagination, it'll also kind of look like a box elder, but it's a great small tree for drier locations. It can take a lot of drought and just an interesting tree if you want a kind of a rare maple that no one else will have. but it has done really well for us at the Arboretum, also at Spring Grove, and then they have a nice one at Cincinnati Zoo. So this is one that we definitely can't recommend too much. Again, nice smooth gray bark, kind of an open spreading habit. This is a tree out at the Arboretum. Our tree is kind of more face shaped. Paper bark maple. So this is one, if you want nice, beautiful red bark, this is your tree. It's very slow growing. Has great fall color as well. And then the bark is really stunning. Our tree at the Arboretum has more of a greenish tone to it. So I've seen them from this color all the way up to, beautiful orange or red. And then they peel and have all this nice exfoliation. Then also there's the Gerard's hybrid paper bark maple. So it's a hybrid between Grisium and Nico Ince. The Nico maple has great, finely flaking bark, kind of a reddish texture, and then red fall color mixed with orange. So you can see that nice exfoliation. This is a tree out of the Arboretum along our main loop trail path. Again, zooming in on that nice bark character there. This is another tree that would do well in full sun. It can take drought and kind of crappy soil for a maple. So it's one that you can use in a home landscape fairly easily. Acer triflorum. This is 3-flower maple. It's probably one of my favorites of the smaller maples. It's unusual in that it's another trifoliate maple. It has nice orangey to red fall color, and it stays in the 20 to 30 foot tall range with nice exfoliating bark again. Its bark is more of a bronzy copper in coloration to tan and looks great all winter. So sugar maples, that's not anything new to most people. We have lots of sugar maples in the area, but there are various cultivars. This is one called Bonfire. It has done really well in this area, and they have a nice huge tree over at Spring Grove. This one's very reliable for fall color. If you're looking for a sugar maple that has the reddish tones versus orange, a lot of times you see gold and orange on sugar maples. So if you're looking for one red, you can choose Bonfire. Here you have some typical coloration that you would see on a sugar maple if you don't use Bonfire, which is nice. I like that color too, but some people get tired of the golden colors. So yellow buckeye, our largest of the native buckeyes. This one does not tend to get Gignardia leaf blotch as badly as some of the other buckeyes. And so they have huge specimens over at Spring Grove. We have some nice young trees at the Arboretum that are about 10 to 20 years old, and they are all doing great. It's one of the only of our native buckeyes that will have foliage in October, late enough to actually have some fall color. And they can turn yellow to a little bits of hints of red. So it's a nice tree. Whereas the Ohio buckeye, red buckeye tends to defoliate in August and isn't the best for any sort of a fall color display. Kind of a narrow upright form, but again, they get to immense proportions. And here you have the flowers in the spring. So red buckeye that I just mentioned is a much smaller tree. So it's back down to the size of a small tree, very, very large shrub, depending on how you grow it. If you keep it to a single trunk or maybe a couple of trunks, you can grow it into a small tree if you limit up. They bloom in mid to early April, so it's very early in its bloom. Here's a tree out there, Arboretum. This is at about 20 years of age. The size you'll see on that. This is a tree you have to learn to love and appreciate because in August of every year, like clockwork, it loses all its foliage. It gets Gignardia leaf blotch, doesn't really hurt the plant, but it loses all the leaves and then you have a bare tree with no foliage on it. Every year, our student interns that haven't worked with us before thinks the trees have died and they want to come down, and we have to say no, kind of around with something to stop the chainsaws before they take them out. But they have really nice blooms in the spring. So this is another one that can do well equally in shade or full sun. If you want lots of flowers, you'll need more sunlight. So putting it in too much shade, you'll get a kind of an open shrubby tree that doesn't bloom quite as much. But they're very tolerant of drought, and that will also kind of help speed up any loss of leaves if they're trying to keep the leaves on. Here's again the foliage and the flowers. So they kind of open up real kind of narrow like a tube, and then they kind of open up a little bit wider as the flower ages. And here's the fruit. So pawpaw, Acinema triloba. Who all here has been to our pawpaw tasting program in the fall? Quite a few of you, yeah. So we have that every year. It is almost always the second Thursday of September, and that's on our website if anybody's interested in going to that. We have about 100 people that comes to that, and we taste about between 7 to 12 varieties of pawpaws. It's really fun. We include ice cream and breads and that sort of stuff too. So this is a nice native understory tree that you can see in our local woods. They are not blooming yet. I've noticed the flower buds are just starting to swell a little bit. And usually that they go into full bloom sometime in early April. And so you don't really grow this for the flowers. The flowers are interesting. If you're up underneath the tree looking at them, but they hang downward. So they're not really something you're going to see as an ornamental feature that much. And of course, they are insect pollinated. They have kind of a pungent, almost like dead rancid meat smell to the flower. And so they do attract flies. That's the main pollinator. To get fruit, you need to have 2 genetically different plants on your property. So you could get one, you could get a seedling out of some pawpaws from the woods, grow that tree, and then also you would need to get a seedling from some neighbor or a friend's house, or buy a named variety. Just as long as you have 2 genetically different specimens, they will cross-pollinate and produce fruit. A single tree by itself will only rarely produce fruit, so they do not self-pollinate very well at all. They're not totally incapable of self-pollination, but it's pretty rare. I've got one in my front yard that I never pollinate, and every now and then it produces fruit. The year I did pollinate it produced so much fruit it broke its branches. So you got to be careful with how much you self-pollinate them or force the pollination with.
What kind of spacing between trees for pollination?
I would not go more than 100 feet apart. More than that, and you're probably not going to get very good fruit set. So they can be pretty enormous. These are some fruits out at the Arboretum with a pin next to them for some size comparison. This is a nice cluster of 4 fruit. Just came off of some of our trees out in the woods. And so they do like to form little thickets. They sucker and form colonies in the understory of the woods. And if you have an open area with mulch around it, they will also slowly sucker and form more trees. You can also have them as a single trunk tree out on the lawn. They have nice orange fall color in full sun. If they're out in the woods, they're kind of more of a yellowish coloration. But they form a nice dense pyramidal tree, about 20 to 30 foot tall when they're in full sun. So river birch, I think a lot of people know about river birch. A lot of people have them next to their house, next to the foundation. Way too close to the foundations, right? This tree here is heritage river birch out of the Arboretum. It is 25 years old and it is about 50 to 60 foot tall and about 50 foot wide now. So you can see if that was next to your house, it would be up, knocking your gutters off and damaging the shingles and smacking your windows every time the wind blew. So always got to remind people, don't plant them next to the house. So they have nice bark, and that's why we like them. They're very nice, creamy, exfoliating bark. And here's one called City Slicker that we've been trialing for about a decade and a half at the Arboretum. It came out of Southeast Oklahoma, so it's a bit more drought tolerant, heat tolerant, and also can take higher pH soil. So river birches are naturally found in alluvial floodplains with kind of an acidic soil pH characteristic. And so this one was native to an area that's a little bit less acidic, and so it does better in our area because we have higher pH limestone-based soil. So this one has darker green leaves. It's more drought tolerant and is the last one in our collection to drop leaves whenever we get too dry. And it has extra white bark. So City Slicker is even more white. It rivals our white birches, our paper birch, in the level of whiteness of the trunk. So we like that too, because a lot of people like white coloration on their birch trunks. So if you have an area where you need a smaller tree that can take wet soil, if you like river birch and the flaking bark, there's a variety called Little King or Fox Valley, and that's what this cultivar is. It's very dense, very compact growing, but with time, they do get some size to them. So the one on the right is about 20 to 25 foot tall. Our plant label, when we put these in, said 10 feet tall by 10 feet wide, and that is a lie. They get a lot larger than that. I've had lots of landscape architects come out and see these and freak out. And landscape companies are like, oh no, I'm not too close to my neighbor, to my client's house. So they do get larger with time. Plants don't read labels. So that's why it's important to go out to the places like the Arboretum to see plants after 20, 30 years of growth. Or even go to Spring Grove and you can see them after 150 years of growth. So this is one that we're kind of trialing out. It's really cool. It's Carpinus biminea. It's the Himalayan hornbeam. This was a plant that was exchanged with us from Chicago Botanic Garden about 2 years ago. And it's a hornbeam, but it comes from Eastern Asia. It has very nice reddish purple new growth. And so it's one we're kind of trialing and watching, see how it does. I checked it recently. It has not died. I was worried the polar vortex would have caused damage. For anyone who wasn't in town when that happened, we were 45 degrees about 8 o'clock at night. And the next morning I woke up and we were down near 10 below. I was 10 below at my house. The Arboretum was like negative 9.5. So almost 10 below. So we've had a lot of damage on our plant material, especially anything that was broadleaf evergreen. And we are seeing some damage, unfortunately, on our deciduous plants too. They're even also dying back. So cross your fingers. So moving on to cedars, this is another group of evergreens that could be considered to replace our Colorado blue spruce. So Carl Fuchs is one that probably would do a pretty good job at being a substitute for Colorado blue spruce. It is a selection that came from kind of high elevation in Afghanistan, Pakistan. Actually, it's Pakistan. It's a special high plateau that's very, very dry and cold. And it's done really well for us. It's went through several polar vortex events with us and has not really had any damage. A lot of the other cedars will, I should say true cedrus will lose their needles. And we've had some dieback in the really bad winters. So this is one that's pretty reliable. The newest, when the growth comes out, you know, a fresh flush in the summertime, it's got a really nice silvery blue color. It does kind of fade to kind of a silvery green through the wintertime, but each year as it grows, you get a nice flush of silvery blue foliage. A little bit more open than a Colorado blue spruce, but much better adapted. And again, cedars need well-drained soil. Almost all our conifers do best with well-drained soil versus heavy clay. So this is Ciceriphyllum japonicum, Amazing Grace. This is the Amazing Grace Weeping Katsura. This is over at Spring Grove. This tree was planted there in 1977 or 78, 1978, I think. So it's over 40 years old. Beautiful plant. It's growing out into the main drive at Spring Grove. You can walk up underneath it and take pictures with your kids, your grandkids, your spouse, your girlfriend, boyfriend, whoever. It's a great place to take photographs, so they don't mind. Here's our tree out at the Arboretum. This tree is about 25 years old, so half that age, and also getting really nice and impressive. It's becoming another place that you could go up under and take photographs. So one thing about this tree, they are not the most drought tolerant of trees. So put this in nice, loamy, well-drained soil, and if we have a really bad drought, the grass starts turning brown, and you need to water your lawn, you also need to be watering this tree. So that's kind of your gauge. If your lawn's turning brown, your Katsura won't be happy. It won't kill it. It'll just start turning yellow and losing all of its leaves. And it may do that before you want it to do so. So they kind of look kind of ratty in a dry, droughty year. But like I said, it doesn't usually kill the tree. It just makes it look really bad. And so if that's not something you're willing to do, this may not be the best tree for landscape use. But otherwise, it's pretty adaptable to our local conditions. Red buds probably don't need much of an introduction. There are lots of them out there. This is Appalachian Red out of the Arboretum a few years ago. Really intense coloration. This one has almost a real deep rosy pink. There's also the variety Alba, which is a naturally occurring form that has a pure white flower. And I like that quite a lot. Someone says, what's a great native tree to replace calorie pears? Well, you could put a white redbud out. So that's a good option. There's a really new one that we've been trialing from Gardens Alive over the last 2 or 3 years. This is Golden Falls. And so this is out at the entrance to our butterfly garden. This is a nice golden leafed weeping redbud. So we've got it training it over our arbor there, and it has reluctantly taken off now. It took it about 2 years to learn what we wanted it to do, and it's now forming a waterfall effect across the top of the arbor. Very fast growing, typical flower coloration on redbud, but nice, beautiful, bright golden foliage. And it is now available. I think it came onto the market to the public last year, so you can't buy this plant now. Fringe tree, so Chionanthus virginicus, this is our native fringe tree. It's native to the southeast, native along stream banks and creeks, but does pretty well outside of those wet areas. So it's a full sun plant. If you want the best bloom, it can take some shade, but it won't bloom nearly as much in shade. Blooms about mid-April, beautiful white flowers, kind of can spread with age, turns kind of bright yellow in the fall. This is a big tree over at Spring Grove. And there's the real nice fine, thin petals that they have on the fringe tree. Female trees develop fruit, so these nice purple grape-like clusters of fruit, and that's an additional benefit if you actually have a female tree. Unfortunately, you can't tell what you have until they start blooming, so you just have to be lucky. Another great Native American tree is the American yellowwood. So Cladrassus kentuckia, it is found in the Palisades of the Kentucky River Gorge. Anyone who's been down in that area, it's just south of Lexington on the Kentucky River Gorge. Those steep cliffs with limestone ledges, that's the kind of the habitat it lives in. So it can take high pH calcareous soil, which is what we have in this area. It's limestone based, so it does well in that. Beautiful flowering. The only downside is that it is kind of an alternate year flowering tree. So some years it's completely covered like this, and the next year it'll be more sparse, like this. So it's in the pea family, so it has those nice wisteria-like looking blooms, since wisterias and yellowwood are both in the pea family. And it's a nice tree. It has silvery gray bark, light gray bark on the tree, kind of has an upright vase shape. And here's another picture. This is over at Spring Grove, showing an alternate flowering year. So some years you won't have very many flowers, but when it does bloom, it'll knock your socks off. Here's some flower clusters out there. Arboretum. Looks really good with some nice deep red Japanese maples behind it for contrast, right? And these are right along our walking path. You can see here's another year where it wasn't the fullest of bloom. But still, it's always beautiful, very elegant, nice native evergreen tree. So flowering dogwood usually doesn't need too much of an introduction. There's a bazillion of them out there. In terms of care for this tree, it needs to be in shade. So morning sun, afternoon shade would be where to site this tree. If you're planting one, do not put it in an area where it gets afternoon sun. Baking hot afternoon sun will just predispose these to dogwood borers, which will quickly take them out. Unfortunately, a lot of the arboretum was designed with these out in full sun, so we lost quite a few in the last few years. When we start replacing, we're going to try to put them in areas that get morning sun and afternoon shade. But there are a ton of different cultivars out, different colorations. Some are variegated, some have white, pink, almost quote red, but they're not really red. They're kind of like a rosy pink flower color. The best one out of all of those, in our opinion, locally, is Spring Grove dogwood. It was actually found in Spring Grove. It's the only dogwood that survived the 1977-78 winter in this area. I was a baby at that time. I have no recollection of what happened, but I've heard it was awful. It was the only dogwood in our area that actually bloomed. Everything else that year killed all the flower buds. A lot of them died back from that, if not died. So this one was lasted through all of that. And it has great fall color, and then it's a complete cloud of white when it blooms. We have them at the Arboretum, and they're by far our best flowering of our flowering dogwoods. Just a cloud of white. Cornus Cusa. This is a dogwood that can do a lot better in full sun. So if you've got a full sun area that you're dying to have a dogwood in, I would recommend Cornus Cusa. It is an Asian dogwood, so not native, but it does a lot better in our hot, humid summers that we experience, and it can take full sun without getting borers. It doesn't get as stressed as much. And it has the added benefit of flaky bark. So it kind of exfoliates and it has wintertime interest. The flowering dogwood is kind of rough and kind of dark gray and not nearly as attractive as the bark on Cornus Cusa. So if you limit this up, you can get spring bloom, fall color, and wintertime interest. So American smoke tree, a great native tree as well to the Ozarks. Not really native right locally in this area, but it is nonetheless a North American native. It's another tree that's adapted to limestone-based soil. So it grows in limestone outcroppings in the Ozarks and is very well adapted to our area because of that. So this is over at Spring Grove, showing that nice fall color. They can have anything from yellows to orange to red to mottled, all of those colors to full red, full orange. Every year it's a little bit different, but always pretty nice. This is over at our place, just down the road. This is one of our 25-year-old trees, showing that form's kind of open and upright, but then it actually has kind of a nice scaly, flaky bark, if you're ever into bark. And we have these cloudy, cold winters here, so I always look for things that are interesting to look at in the wintertime too. So this is oven cypress. This is one that we were trialing. It's an alternative to Leland cypress, which has been planted a lot in our area. This one has been a lot more disease resistant in the south. And here, our big issue would be, is it cold hardy? Is it any more cold hardy than Leland cypress? And the answer was no. So this picture was taken sometime in January. You can tell a little bit of browning on that. The browning has since consumed the whole tree, unfortunately. But it has a more kind of like a nice feathery texture. So this might be a zombie plant, unfortunately. There's a Plants vs. Zombies game that I've heard about and I've never played. I guess some people know about it and have played it. So here we go. Plant zombie. I think that's what that's going to be, unfortunately. So Carolina buckthorn, Frangula caroliniana. A lot of people know of buckthorns because they know about the invasive buckthorn. So there are European buckthorns that are invasive, that are spreading around and gradually moving into our area that will be a problem in natural areas. But this is not one of them. This is actually a native species that comes up as far north as the Ohio River, barely creeps into southern Ohio. We're on the very fringe northern edge of it, and then it goes further south. It grows along creek banks naturally. And it can take quite a bit of shade. It kind of lives in shaded wooded creeks, and it's happy with that. Kind of gets kind of tall and lanky and spreads out in those areas. But if you put it in full sun, it forms a nice rounded small tree, and it gets absolutely loaded with these red fruit. Nice kind of shiny leaves. It reminds me of a coffee plant. If you ever had a coffee plant as a house plant, it kind of looks like that, except this is a hardy outside small tree. So the birds love the fruit, and you will get seedlings from this occasionally, but it's native, right? So it will move around a little bit. I've had a few seedlings in our viburnum beds. Our interns got excited. They all took them home, and then they started pulling more of them throughout the season. So they're like, wait a minute, what did I take home? So I'm like, well, it's a native plant. It's doing what it's supposed to do. So the birds do like the fruit, which is important. If you're willing to put out something that attracts birds and feeds the birds, this is one of them. It's not really edible by people. If you eat these, you will get a very strong laxative effect. So don't do that. But very, very nice. A few nurseries tried growing it a few years ago, and they failed to get enough sales of this plant because too many people thought that all buckthorns are evil and invasive, and no one would buy this. They didn't realize there was a native buckthorn. And so people like you all keep asking for it. Start creating a demand, maybe nurseries might sell it in the future. I do know big nurseries here tonight, no pressure. But
How do you tell it from the invasive?
the leaves on the invasive buckthorn are a little bit smaller and even more shiny. And then the fruits are very, very, very dark black. Not sure who asked me that. Was that you? Okay, yeah. And the invasive one gets pretty large. I've seen 30-foot trees down in Louisville in the person's backyard. They thought it was this one, and I'm like, nope, you got the European one, which is Carthatica, I think. So, all right, Genocladus divicus. This is our native Kentucky coffee tree, state heritage tree. It was our state tree for about 5 years, and then they switched it back to tulip tree. To be a state anything in Kentucky, it has to be native in all 120 counties. We have a lot of counties, and that's kind of hard. This was found in 85 counties, so it lost its title and was made our state heritage tree. So sad story for our coffee tree. So, Kentucky state tree is the tulip tree, but so is Indiana, so is Tennessee, So doesn't make it very special to me if all 3 states have the same tree. We could have this, right? So anyway, female trees do have, the characteristic coffee beans that they're known for. They're not really beans that you would use for coffee. They don't have any caffeine in them, but I guess early settlers, pioneers did use them for that. You can make a coffee substitute out of the beans inside. I've never tried it. Not saying you should try it, but it was used for that. The bark is very nice in the wintertime. It's kind of rough and flaky, and it has a kind of a silvery gray coloration. It looks great on our nice blue sky backgrounds. And here's the tree form in the summertime. It has a very nice feathery, almost looking bipinnately compound foliage. It's a very, very drought tolerant tree. It's tolerant of full sun. It can grow in the forest, in the woods. It kind of forms a nice tall upright trunk with very, very small crown. If you put it out in full sun, it will spread out and kind of form an upright growing tree. It's not one that's really attractive when it's young. It's kind of a stick tree that kind of doesn't have a lot of branches until it gets about 5 or 6 years growth on it, and then it starts really kind of filling in its canopy. So if you do plant these, it's one that kind of have patience on. Ginkgos kind of have the same reputation. When they're young, they're kind of gaunt, not very heavily branched, but it doesn't take long for these to take off. And they grow pretty fast once they're established and heavy. So ginkgo, I don't think it needs too much introduction. These do well in our area. I've not ever came across a ginkgo that actually died from just natural causes. Usually it's something that humans have done to it. They've cut the roots off, or it's been, something else done to it from our activities. So they're definitely survivor trees. These trees are over at Spring Grove. They've got 160-year-old trees down at Cave Hill. Likewise, Lexington Cemetery in Lexington has trees that are over 150, 140 years old. The Henry Clay Estate in Lexington has some massive ginkgos as well. So they're long living, surviving trees. So they're not something that's gonna kind of go away on you. So here's some of those huge trees to see the huge girth on those. Nice green fall color and green coloration, and a nice golden fall color in the fall. And here's some trees out there. Arboretum. These are the 25 years old or so. And so, in another 120 years, they'll look like this. And this is one called Saratoga. It's more rounded, kind of has like a fishtail looking shape on the foliage. Juniperus virginiana, that's our eastern red cedar. Anybody in here a farmer that hates red cedars? One. So I always get that. But it unfortunately is our most prevalent native evergreen tree in our area. That probably does the best in our landscapes because it's adapted to the high pH soil, the heavy clay, all of that. It's adapted to that. It can take our droughts and everything that comes with our climate. But there are cultivars out there. And I like Burkeye. Burkeye is a real nice one. There's also Glauca. And if you use your imagination, squint your eyes, you could kind of use it as a alternative to Colorado blue spruce. So that's why I have it in here. I've seen nice examples of this. It's at the Atlanta Botanic Garden down in Gainesville, Florida, at their Gainesville location, that beautiful Burkeye. They have nice ones at the zoo. These are actually at the Cincinnati Zoo. You can see they have the wintertime Christmas light display on that. But they have nice little cones. Actually, they call them berries. People call them berries. They're actually little cones, like a modified scale on that. So they have a lot of interest in the coloration of the fruit and also the needles. So you can see the kind of difference between a regular green looking juniper next to it versus Burkeye's coloration. And there's a little small tree out there, Arboretum. They grow pretty fast. This tree's only a couple years old, and they put out about 4 foot of growth last year. So we talked about the tulip tree a few minutes ago. It is, of course, the state tree of Kentucky, Indiana, and Tennessee, as I mentioned. It is a nice tree. I do like them. They grow very fast. In the right conditions, it can be one of the most stately of our trees that are native to the area. They grow great in the woods. You can see massive trees down in Smoky Mountains, unbelievably huge trees in the Smoky Mountains. But they want that nice, loamy, well-drained, but moist soil to do well. They'll do okay in kind of heavier clay to a degree, but they just won't grow as quickly and look as nice. And they can be prone to root rot and other things if the soil is too wet. And so if you're lucky enough to have branches that are low enough to see the flowers. They do bloom in April and May. Kind of nice orangey center to that. They're in the magnolia family. So they're very closely related to magnolias. So if you use your imagination, you can kind of see that connection there. And they get massive, easily one of the largest trees in the eastern United States. And the full sun, grown out in the full sun, they'll form a nice spreading upright oval canopy. And in the forest, they will compete and grow to the very top of the canopy of the woods. You'll see trunks maybe 80 to 100 foot high with no branches and kind of the old growth areas. So another cool magnolia family member, that's actually a magnolia, is big leaf magnolia. This is what you will see down in eastern Kentucky, eastern Tennessee, and the Appalachian Mountains. Have you ever seen those magnolias with the huge leaves? They almost look like newspaper on the ground when they fall off and kind of flop around. They got kind of silvery underside to them. This is a native understory tree to the Appalachian Mountains, but it does well here. There's a massive specimen out at Spring Grove, which is on the screen here. They have these enormous white flowers. They bloom usually late April into May, and then the leaves can be, this wide. So you want something that looks real tropical and unusual, put next to your patio and your backyard. This is a plant for that. If you have nice uplighting to kind of light the undersides of the leaves, they just glow at night with that silvery underside. Yeah.
Is it high fragrance like the other magnolias?
Not in the same way. They have a fragrance, but I wouldn't say it's something that I enjoy. And it doesn't really waft around very much. It's not as bad as like a calorie pear, but it kind of has that, it's moving in that direction. It's not like the southern magnolia, unfortunately.
Is the tulip poplar the same way? I've never smelled it.
Very, very, very light. Yeah, it's got a very light fragrance. Yeah, it's not bad. It's not anything that's gonna, also get your attention as far as nice either. So very faint. This is not a bad smelling flower. It's just very faint. It's kind of in between. Magnolia tripetala, which is the umbrella magnolia, which is very closely related to Macrophylla. Its flowers are even a bit more pungent. So it's the other big leaf magnolia you'll see in the eastern part of Kentucky and the Smokies. Here's that big leaf that they have, very tropical looking. I can tell you not to put it out on an exposed open ridge top, which is pretty much the entire arboretum. Our arboretum is very windy, and so we have to move ours around to put them in areas where they don't get hit by, high winds. Because these were out by our soccer field, and every time they get sides to them, they would uproot and blow over. So if you put them out, make sure you've got them behind a big wall or behind other trees to kind of keep the wind off of them. So sweet bay magnolia is used a lot around here. We've got some big ones at the front of the extension office when you came in. We have a provenance collection out at the arboretum from every geographical subtype of the species. So we've got stuff from Texarkana, got things from western Tennessee, western North Carolina, up in Boston area, its entire range. It ranges from Boston all the way down to the east coast of Texas and down over Louisiana and almost northern Florida too. So it has a really massive range. So we have all of those different populations that they're able to study. We have one it's called variety Ludoviciana. And so it's the Texarkana variety for Texas, Arkansas, and Louisiana come together in a kind of three-cornered area of those states. It has exceptionally large leaves, kind of like a southern magnolia. And the flowers bloom sporadically until September. Most sweet bay magnolias bloom in June around here, but this one blooms quite late in the year. So this is what we're going to be pushing more out of the arboretum. And it is quite a nice plant. The leaves are much larger, near the size of a southern magnolia, but also very silvery, which is one of the traits of sweet bay magnolia. So this is one that can take a lot of wet, poorly drained soil. If you've got an area that's too wet for a lot of other stuff, sweet bay magnolia would not be bothered by that whatsoever.
What was the variety?
This is the variety Ludoviciana.
What about the pH score?
It is not going to enjoy anything above 8, but it's more forgiving than other plants. So it's going to do best in a slightly acidic to neutral soil, but it's not. I've not really had too many issues with it with really high soil pH. Not like some plants would be. You would get stunted growth, very yellow foliage. If you're growing it if you had a crushed limestone driveway and you removed it and left some limestone in the soil and put one of these in, it probably wouldn't like that. It'd probably be a little bit too much for it to handle. But most of the time, these do really well. I've never really had too many issues with them. So Leonard Messel Magnolia has been in bloom out there already. It was in bloom until yesterday morning when we got down to 21 degrees, kind of ruined it. But it's one of our first of our hybrid magnolias that blooms, along with star magnolias. Really nice plant, kind of has a two-toned flower. And it was Mike Clare's favorite magnolia in the Arboretum, for those who knew Mike Clare before he moved off to California. This was his favorite one, always. He always wanted to know when it was going to come into bloom, so he'd rather take a million pictures of it. And he took millions of pictures probably. So very nice plant. It's along our dogwood trail. We have about 5 specimens of it. And it's a nice plant because it kind of blooms in a staggered fashion. You can get, if it's blooming pretty early and gets hit by a very early freeze when it first starts to bloom, those flowers will get knocked off, but it has more buds that it hasn't opened yet. It'll kind of reflush out more flowers. And they can get frozen. Sometimes you might get a third flush of flowers. This year they were able to bloom pretty much unaffected until yesterday morning. So I don't know if we'll have any more reblooming. We might. So Machia amarensis, the Amir Machia, is a really cool tree that we have. It's a mid-sized tree that would do well in full sun and has done really well in the Arboretum. I've seen it also in Florence. We use it as a street tree in Florence and has done outstandingly well. They bloom every year in summertime, and they're quite a insect pollinator attracting plant. So you get bees, butterflies on it even. It really attracts pollinators. It is not native. It is an Asian species, but it really seems to do well here with keeping our pollinators happy. This is along our loop trail of the Arboretum, kind of near our Japanese maples. So this tree is in full bloom. This is in June. We have one that actually blooms almost into July. So it's a midsummer blooming plant. Very nice. The bark is kind of a coppery color, and it's nice in the wintertime. Gives us a wintertime interest as well. So you're looking for a mid-sized kind of a shade tree that also flowers with nice bark. This could be a one to consider. So Dawn Redwood. This is another conifer, but this is a deciduous conifer. It loses its foliage in the fall. This is the Ohio champion Dawn Redwood in this photograph over at Spring Grove. Stunning tree. It's over 120 foot tall, I believe, and got quite the girth at the base. Here's our trees out there, Arboretum. These are 25 years old and about 45 to 50 foot tall. So got a ways to go, but they're doing great. So if you want one that's not maybe as menacingly huge with time, there's the cultivar that's gold foliage known as Ogon, or Gold Rush is another name it's sold under. It is a golden cultivar. So the coloration, is extremely bright gold in the spring when it comes out. Fades a little bit through the summer, kind of turns like a limey green with age. But any new growth that it has will have that nice golden color. Maybe grows half as fast as the trait species, but it still will get some size to it with age. Our tree's about 20 years old and about 35 to 40 foot tall. So black gum, Nyssa sylvatica. If you're looking for probably the best tree for reliable fall color in our area, black gum would be at the top of my list. So very reliable fall color, and there are lots of cultivars coming out that are being bred and selected for fall color. This is one I put in here just because of who it came from. This is Steve Foltz's weeping black gum that he found over in Lakeside Park. It's called Pinwood Weeper because it was on Pinwood Street over there. So he's saved that one and got it propagated some. And a storm came in the last 2-3 years. It broke half the tree out. So it's a good thing he got some cuttings. But they have nice form. It's a forest tree. They can grow in the middle of the woods and be a canopy dominant species, or they can be on the edge of the woods or out in the open as well. So they kind of have a nice open spreading habit and that outstanding brick red fall color. So Peronia subiqualis is kind of a newer tree that we've been growing for the last 10 to 15 years, and it is doing outstandingly well. It has nice purple fall color, and it starts having fall color in mid-September. That can also often last all the way into early November. So there's not much around here that actually has fall color that long. And it is really stunning. It's kind of a burgundy color, it has nice deep green foliage all summer. And then suddenly, the first time we get in the 40s in September, boom, the fall color forms. So can't mention it too highly. It is available more and more. So there's a nursery in Ohio known as Brotsman's Nursery that's selling it. They now have 5 clones. We have the original clone that was brought in. This was, of course, brought in, introduced in the United States. So they have 5 different clones now that have been brought in. There'll be more selections going on and all that. So the variety that we have, the clone that we have, I guess, it has like some sort of long number to it. It's definitely one that's great with fall color. They planted it down at Udale Gardens in Louisville, and it's also doing equally well there and all over the country, honestly. It's growing well as far south as North Florida and all up and down the East Coast up to Chicago. It's doing great. So really tough tree. It's very drought tolerant and moderately fast growing. So it kind of sat there for a few years and then it took off. This is kind of a size comparison with one of our interns sitting next to it a few years ago. So our tree is about 20 foot tall after about 12 years of growth. So looking at Picea aves, which is Norway spruce and Oregon spruce. So that's kind of our, I think I lost my microphone. Can you still hear me? Yes. All right. So, geez, our batteries are all dying. Did I lose our Zoom, Josh?
No,
It says I'm signed out on my computer.
you're actually still live on Zoom.
Oh. All right, we will continue on. So Picea aves and Picea orientalis. Picea aves is what's commonly used in landscaping all over this area. It's the Norway spruce that everybody has for a screen. They grow really fast, which is the attraction, deep green, fast growing. But as they age, especially they get very prone to drought damage. So whenever you see brown grass, you better be watering your lawn. You better be watering that Norway spruce, otherwise you will lose it. They die quite quickly from drought damage. So anytime we have a bad drought, more than a month or so without rain, these start dropping like flies. But there's a nice alternative known as the Oriental spruce. It's very similar in habit, maybe a little bit more narrow, but it's extremely drought tolerant compared to the Norway spruce. So Norway spruce is on the left here or of the screen, and then Oriental spruce is on the right. So you can see very similar. Oriental spruce gets a bad rap for being slower growing than Norway spruce. Yes, but it's not that slow. It's definitely faster growing than a Colorado blue spruce, but not quite as fast as Norway spruce. I don't know about you, but if I invest a lot of money and time in putting out a screen, I want it to be there a long time. I don't want to have a bad drought when I'm on vacation and all my Norway spruce die if I have it there for a screen. So Oriental spruce is reliable. Spring Grove has a lot of these. I think they lost a couple dozen, maybe 100 Norway spruce in the 2007 drought. If anyone remembers that year, it was terrible. We had almost three months without rain. They lost 1 or 2 Oregon spruce out of hundreds of trees at Spring Grove. So that tells you how much more durable this species is. Another nice spruce that we've had at the Arboretum that has not had needle cast. So needle cast is the disease that's been taking out all of our spruce, our Colorado blue spruce, is the tiger tail spruce. So this one's got a nice kind of silvery underside of the needles, a little bit twisty, and it has been very, very needle cast resistant for us so far. Same is true at other places.
What's the name of that one?
Tiger tail spruce. Yeah, no problem. And you can see it's got a nice kind of a bluish cast because of the undersides of the needles. They kind of twist a lot, so you get a lot of that reflective underside showing. It's slow growing, and actually there's all the information. Everybody needs to write it down. I apologize for the small screen. We were planning on having this at the Richard Center, which has massive screens, but our rooms here have these smaller screens. So hopefully that still works out for you all. So another spruce that we have that's done really well, and I think is probably going to be ironclad, is the Chihuahua spruce. So this is a species native in Mexico, but it's very cold hardy. There's a lot of cold hardiness to be found in the Mexican highlands. It's totally fine to grow here. But it's very, very tolerant to higher soil pH and drought. And so this is not one that's gonna, die from long, hot, dry spells. It's very tolerant to dry, hot conditions, and it has not had any issues with needle cast. The one drawback of this is that it has very, very sharp needles. If you can see those little pricks up there, but I'm not gonna this trick here. You can see that's very, very sharp and pointy. I picked this picture back in, I guess, probably early January, and I was trying to like move the branch around for the best angle with my camera, and I literally bled from doing that. They're very sharp. So kids and dogs, not gonna like this plant. If you want it to be left alone and no one to bother you, and you want it, between you and your neighbor that you can't stand, go at it. This tree will keep them away, and they will hate you for planting. But it looks nice, and it has been very tough for us. So lacebark pines, they are an interesting conifer to have because of the bark that they can show off. It's on kind of an upright, dense habit, but very, very nice flaky bark, kind of like what you would see on Coosa dogwood, or even kind of almost like a sycamore in a way. Very, very nice bark texture. I love wintertime interest. I love nice bark on plants, and this is one of my favorite conifers for nice bark. They otherwise have a nice, dense, upright, oval growth habit. It's another pine that's very tolerant to drought, so heat and drought won't hurt this species, but wet soil, like almost all conifers, it will struggle with that. So just make sure you have a nice, well-drained soil. So Eastern white pines are way overplanted around here. We see people put them out, they die constantly. This, I think, is a nice replacement for Eastern white pine. This is the Korean pine. So Pinus berninensis. It's kind of reminds me of it looks like an Eastern white pine on a bad hair day. Its needles kind of twist a little bit. You can see that on the screen, but they kind of have a little bit of a twist to them. So it kind of looks a little bit fluffed up and stuff compared to an Eastern white pine. It has done really well in pretty much every place we put it, except for poorly drained soil. We put it in kind of a wetter area just to trial it out, and we lost one of our trees there. Otherwise, the average clay that doesn't hold water, they're doing great. This is kind of at the edge of one of our soccer fields, which isn't the best soil that we have. And this little tree is just loving life out there. Very, very full, very fluffy. Here's an older tree. You can see the Eastern white pines behind it. Look how gross that looks. It's just awful, right? So what would you rather have? Korean pine or the Eastern white pine? So nice plant. And like our label says, avoid wet sites, and you're all right. So pitch pine is a nice native pine that I think could be used more often. It's native in eastern Kentucky, southeast Ohio, up into Pennsylvania, New Jersey, along the mid-Atlantic, and then down to the southeast. It's another drought-tolerant plant. It can take, all of the tough sites that they grow in already, and then they do pretty well here too. Just again, keep it out of wet soil, and you'll be all right. There's the close-up of the needles. If you want a nice, brightly colored pine, this is Waite's Golden Virginia Pine. So Virginia pines are a native pine that's close to being found here. You can go down, you'll see pockets of it, and I've seen pockets of Virginia pine down in Grant County and here and there. They typically indicate a little bit lower soil pH, and you'll see them mixing out with Eastern red cedar. If your soil pH gets too low, red cedars go away and you get this in its place. So it is kind of regionally native, very well adapted. This cultivar turns gold in the fall and wintertime. Anytime we go down below about 28 degrees, it causes the nice golden coloration to come out. And that literally is how bright gold it is. This is a picture I took in January, and it was literally that bright. Just knocks your socks off. As the temperatures warm back up, it will turn green again and kind of lose that. But Virginia pine kind of grows a little bit twisted and gnarly. It's not a tree for everybody. Some people don't like the way it looks. It is kind of in the scrub pine group, if you will. So sometimes people don't like that. But I think it's a cool tree. So Akame cherry. This is our first of the prunus that will bloom at the Arboretum. Our first cherry to open up its flowers every year. It was blooming before our freeze we had yesterday morning, and it is no longer blooming now. Unfortunately, it kind of fried those blooms. Won't hurt the tree at all, but it is one of the very first ones to react. You can see in the background with that first picture, the grass was barely even green when they were blooming. So very small, light pink flowers, and they come in profusion, huge amounts of flowers. So it's very, very heavily flowering. So now I'm going to go into some oaks real quick. So white oak, who hasn't heard of white oak, right? It's one of our most well-known native oaks. It's the oak that is used for whiskey and, well, for bourbon barrel production. And it's got great, outstanding fall color. So it's got nice purplish red fall color that usually doesn't show up till November. So when the other trees have finished all with their native fall color, this is one that still kind of glows in the woods. And over at Spring Grove, there's one that's nearly 400 years old. It's the Lucy Braun oak, the top of the hill there. And you can actually go out there and check that tree out. Lucy Braun is kind of over, I think, on the left-hand side. Her grave is near that low branch that's kind of down. Not too far from that. Here is a 25-year-old white oak at the Arboretum. It's about 45 foot tall. So, I mean, it's nothing like it's the previous pictures I've shown, but you know, it's getting up there in some size. So they're having that reputation of growing slowly, but you know, this is still a decent sized tree after 25 years. And our tree kind of has a little bit more of an upright form than normal. We might do something with that in the future. So this is swamp white oak. It's one of my favorite white oaks. It grows faster than the other white oak members do. You can easily get a 50-foot tree in 25 years, no trouble at all. It can take, you know, waterlogged wet soil, heavy clay, all of that. Some tolerance to higher soil pH than some of the other oaks. But when you get up to about a pH of 8, it will start to get chlorosis. You'll see yellowing of foliage and stunting. So typically we don't have too much of that level of soil pH in our area. That kind of happens more as you get towards Illinois. So most of the time, this is a pretty safe oak to use. Fall color is not the best, but it has really nice, beautiful foliage and kind of a silvery underside to it. Here are some swamp white oaks out at the Arboretum in the wintertime. The young branches kind of have a flaking habit, just like a river birch in a way. So scarlet, yeah,
It's a heavy acorn producer, isn't it? That swamp white oak?
they can, yeah. It's kind of another thing with kind of like the yellowwood. It's kind of an alternate year thing. You'll see some years that have tons. They call that mast years with oaks.
Good acorn years are bad, yeah.
Yeah. And then some years that have hardly none at all. When you want to go find acorns or collect acorns, they're not there. When you don't want them there, and they're like all over your driveway or something, then that's just how that all works. So scarlet oak is a nice alternative to pin oaks. If you have pin oaks or know what those are, the ones that the lower branches do this. You can prune them up and they'll do it again every couple of years. Pin oaks are great. They're great trees for wet areas and floodplain type habitats. That's where they're native to. But they really cause a pain over your driveway, over city streets and all that. If you use scarlet oak, you won't have as much trouble because it naturally has more of a spreading outward going branch angle. Leaves are very similar, but it has even better fall color. So it has a reliable scarlet fall color every year. Here's some examples out there. Here's a young tree. You can see that branch pattern is not hanging down to get in the way of the motors and all that. I've always tried to catch these when they're in the peak fall color, and I never have a good, much luck at that. This is trying to get that direction the year I took this photograph. Here's over at Spring Grove. So bur oak. This is probably one of the most heavily used photographs of a bur oak. This is the Illinois state champion bur oak over in, I think, Champaign, Illinois. Just to show you kind of the big grandeur of this tree. It is like a northern equivalent to a live oak. Very spreading, very long-lived tree that can easily get to 400 years old or more. And it really needs a lot of space. This is over at Spring Grove. This is their tree that's in the, that 300 plus year age. And really, really nice. I thought I had a picture of somebody under it, but I don't think I put that in there. Bur oaks can take quite a bit of wet soil. You'll see them on the banks of the Ohio River, kind of in the floodplain area. But they also do equally well in upland areas with lots of drought. They're very, very, very drought tolerant. But they have these massive acorns that you don't probably want to have over a street or your driveway. Chinkapin oak, one of my favorite oaks. Probably a toss up between chinkapin oak and swamp white oak as being my two favorite oaks. Chinkapin oaks are native to like a high soil pH, calcium, limestone rich soils. And so you see those a lot in central Kentucky around Lexington on horse farms. They're very, very drought tolerant as well. Unfortunately, they're just not growing too much in the trade. So this picture is over at Spring Grove. You can see the building there, that's Dexter Mausoleum. To the left of it, there's kind of a rounded tree kind of growing into the mausoleum. That is a chinkapin oak. It was grown there in this is about 1890, late 1880s, 1890. And that same tree is still there today. This is a picture of it last winter. A group of us, there's this group called the Cincinnati Tree Geeks I'm a part of. We all love trees. We go all over the region to look at cool trees and public gardens and all that. We dedicated it in the memory of Brad Bonnell. She was a local arborist that was really well known. She passed away, unfortunately, suddenly in 2020. We memorialized this tree for her over at Spring Grove. So this chinkapin oak is probably 300 years old at least, we're guessing. So quite a nice tree. Another one of those fantastic species that, you know, you plant that for your grandkids and their grandkids, and it just goes down the line. Here's a tree out there, Arboretum. Chinkapin oaks do grow in the edge of the woods, and in the woods sometimes too, and they'll kind of have a much different habit. Woodland grown trees often grow very tall, straight trunks with very small crowns compared to the trees out in the open. And so you will occasionally see it in the woods.
Smaller acres too, aren't they?
They're fairly small. They are, yeah.
But deer love them.
They do, yeah. Everything. Squirrels, deer, chipmunks, yeah, all of that stuff. These are some real small ones over at the Arboretum. If you're out on our Dogwood Trail where it gets close to Loop Trail, there are two small chinkapin oaks. Well, they're not too small now, but these were planted by as acorns from Mike Clare. He grew them on his balcony here at the extension office and had them in pots, and he knew I liked chinkapin oaks, and he gave them to me one day. We planted them out for him, and they'll probably be there for who knows how much longer. So those are kind of out there in honor of Mike. So if you're ever out there Arboretum walking past the gazebo, you have to check those out. So sumacs. Anybody here hate sumacs? I like them. They do sucker a lot. That's probably its biggest drawback. They have outstanding fall color. And they have these really cool seed structures. So they can be bright red. It's a great native suckering shrub, small tree. If you have a natural area that you want to kind of let kind of grow up into a thicket of a tree, a small tree, it's hard to beat a sumac. And they do sucker a lot. So if a stem gets kind of damaged or something happens to it, you can just cut that stem down. You'll have new sumac shoots coming up almost immediately. So sassafras. Sumacs do need full sun though, so keep that in mind. They're not something that'll grow in deep shade. Sassafras, our native sassafras, is a nice woodland edge tree that you'll see a lot. They're not very easy to transplant, so I recommend either starting these from seed or perhaps getting them from the Division of Forestry. They do sell these occasionally, Division of Forestry in grow bags. They kind of have big, long, a tree this big will have roots that like this long. So they're very crazy when they grow the roots. They're not going to be something that's easily grown in pot and pot culture. Definitely not a ball and burlap tree. So unfortunately, like the nursery people won't have sassafras very easily growable. So you can get them though with like seedlings from Division of Forestry. So nice open architecture. The flowers, which are right here, they're kind of like light green, greenish yellow, nothing really spectacular, but the fall color is what you grow the tree for. If you like red fall color and orange fall color, this is one of the nicest of our native trees for that. Kind of gold too at times. This is over at Spring Grove. This is over at our place, so down the road there, Arboretum. Our south end of the property where our grassland is, the whole fence line is ringed in sassafras groves, and it's very, very nice. So in the fall, when our grassland turns, the tawny tan colors, you have a whole nice ringing of sassafras around that area. And there's some suckers around that coming up, a little bit different color. So another plant that's great for more than one season is the China Snow Peking Lilac. It has great exfoliating bark, kind of a coppery red, really stunning in the wintertime. I like it, kind of brightens up the days. Very, very interesting, almost like little ribbons, kind of peels off. And also kind of has like a cherry look to it. It's kind of like something like a cherry as well as what this might look like, or maybe even like some of the birch trees, the way it peels. But in the summertime, late spring, you get nice flower displays in the late spring, early summer. And they're very, very fragrant. You can smell these blooming, 100, 200, 300 feet away. And there's loaded with bees as well. So it'll be a nice small tree, needs full sun, doesn't do too well in heavy shade, won't bloom very much. So bald cypress is a deciduous conifer that probably doesn't need a lot of introduction. It's one of our large conifers that do well in their area, but it does lose its needles in the fall. Therefore, it's deciduous. You wouldn't be using this as a screen much, but they get exceedingly huge. These are over in Spring Grove. You can see the nice root structure there coming up. The knees, the cypress knees, as we call those. Here's some over at the Arboretum. Our trees are 25 years old and doing that. The previous ones were probably 140 and doing that. So it doesn't take long to get the cypress knees. Again, these trees were planted in like 1997, and they've already got quite a few knees coming out. If you put them in really dry locations, you won't usually see the knees. The trees will grow slower, but these trees are kind of in a swampy pond bank area, so they do grow quite a few knees. This is over at Spring Grove again. You see here our trees are. They're kind of in a low, wet area. The ones that are drier don't have as much knees going on. Thuya placata. So you see this plant used a lot in the area for screening, and especially the new hybrid green giant. So this is green giant. They actually are big trees. And I have a neighbor, my next door neighbor actually, that planted, 30 of these, maybe as far apart as from me and that table. And they've reached this size, and it looks like like a picket fence at the top because they've all grown together and have a little bit of a top that's above it all. I love it. It's a big green wall. They're getting scared about how tall their trees are getting. They asked me this past fall if they should top them. I said, no. If you top those trees, I will sell my house and move away. And they didn't like hearing that. So but then they got the message.
What's the other name for these?
So this is Thuya green giant. Green giant's actually a hybrid. It's not placata, but it has placata in it. Very, very nice trees for screening. They're borderline getting overplanted. There are a few more cultivars coming out. It's always good to try to mix things up. So don't just plant green giant. There are several new varieties of Thuya placata that are coming out. Get some genetic diversity out in the landscape. That way, if a disease comes along, they won't knock all these out. But again, they are nice for screening. Definitely not one to put next to the house because in 20 years, our trees are about 60 foot tall and about 15 foot wide. So you don't want that next to the corner of your house. And I have seen that done. There's some houses on Pleasant Valley that have them right on the corner of the house. So looks like a giant sequoia eating their house up there. So. Yeah, you don't want me to be somebody's up, take pictures of your house and talking about your house one day. So American basswood is a native tree that I don't think gets a lot of publicity that should be talked about more often. They do very well here. They're out in our woods. They do great as a large tree for open sunny lawns, equally as well as in the forest. So they have a nice display of flowers in the spring, and it really attracts insects, pollinators, especially bees. The trees will just be completely humming with honeybees when they're in full bloom. And they kind of have a nice sweet scent. They have a nice fragrance to them too. So this is one of the largest American basswoods I've ever seen. This is down in Lexington at the Lexington Cemetery. This is Henry Clay's estate. Sorry, Henry Clay's mausoleum. I'm sorry, his estate's up just over the side of town. This is where he's buried at his monument. And this is a probably 300-plus-year-old American basswood. Brenda Hartle, who's in this audience, is in this picture, right? So we take our interns down there every now and then and show them big trees, and they always like that. So this gives you an idea. This is a survivor. It lasts for centuries. Here's another picture of that tree from distance. It completely makes everything else around it look tiny. Most of the trees there are pretty large, but this makes them all look like little twigs compared to it. So there's also Tilia tomatosa sterling silver linden. It's a European species, but it does really well here. It has very nice silvery undersides, very dense rounded canopy. and very pleasing structure. And then the foliage is very nice silver underneath. So when we have like a windy day, it'll blow the leaves around and you get a nice flash of silver underneath. And of course it blooms quite heavily too, just like the native basswood, and you get tons of pollinators on it. You can see a little bit of that silvery coloration on this tree in a parking lot island. And that underside there, look at all those flowers. There's a nice sweet scent, and it will literally have, the whole tree will be just buzzing with insects. Occasionally we get complaints from people that have bee allergies, walking around and they walk under this tree and they kind of freak out. So if you have that issue, which that happens, maybe not one for you to use though.
Is that one more disease and pest resistant though? Everyone always complains about lemons.
It used to get a lot of issues with Japanese beetles, but the Japanese beetles population seems to have kind of moved more towards our west, like they're heavier out in Illinois, Missouri, Iowa still gets hit really bad. In our area, the local pathogens, birds and other things have found a way to kind of keep them controlled better. So not as bad as it used to be. We get a little bit of a lace, like a lace bug that kind of bothers ours a little bit, but it's very minor. So Japanese Zelkova, if you're looking for an elm type tree that has a nice upright vase shape that grows fast and forms a good sized shade tree, this is something to consider. It also has really nice fall color, kind of orange and red. This is one called Village Green on the left. It's about 25 years old at the Arboretum. You can see that nice upright vase shape. This one on the right wasn't pruned up as much, and so it kind of branched out a little closer to the ground. That's over at Spring Grove. And so it has a very nice, smooth, almost beech-like bark with a little bit of exfoliation. It's looking up at our tree. A common question that we get from people, and also arborists, is that it grows very crowded branches. They're like this. You know, often a lot of times if a tree does that, they split apart. Like calorie pears are very prone to splitting when they get those narrow crotch angles. These, for whatever reason, don't seem to do that too often. They have a very, very dense, heavy wood, and it must bind a lot better. Maybe the structure holds itself together. So they don't split too often, despite the way they like to grow. And you can prune them and train them when they're young not to do that. So this is a variety that's not very well known of Zelkova, known as Ocon. It's dubbed the orange bark Zelkova. So it has a beautiful golden coloration to the stems and even the trunk. These are just pictures of out there. They're written. It's a beautiful variety that's available at the Klein Nursery in Northeast Ohio. So they do sell wholesale out to everybody around here. So if you want some of these, let our local nurseries know, and maybe we can get some down from Klein. That's an outstanding cultivar. It has a nice upright base shape like the other Zelkovas. And it's done really, really, really well for us. So that is all of my plants. But real quick before I let you all go tonight, here's a short update on what we have going on. So we have started Proven Winners trials at the Arboretum in the last year. We're going to be working with Walters Gardens this year to do perennial trials at the Arboretum. And also we're working with Isley Nursery out of Oregon to try to figure out what conifers we can do best here. So that's replacing all of our Colorado blue spruce and that sort of stuff. So those are exciting things. We're looking for volunteers. If you want to help us out with trials at the Arboretum, we would gladly take volunteers to help us out with that process. Which is a segue into our Helping Hands volunteer work days. Those start on April 4th. It's every Tuesday and Thursday morning from 9 a.m. to 11:30. We provide lunch. It's often pizza because it's whatever I have time to go run out and get. But we do pizza, sometimes sandwiches and drinks, and of course, we do that every morning from April 4th through Halloween usually. And if the weather is warm in November, we'll go into November as late as we can. And so our next program, that if you like trees and like what you heard tonight, I want to see some of the stuff in person. We'll have our spring blooms and ID walk on April 13th from 1 to 3 p.m. out there. Robbie Brockman, our new horticulture agent, will be joining me out there. And he's an outstanding new addition to the staff here at Extension. He's an entomologist by training and worked at the Arboretum as an intern with us back in like 2016. So we're really happy to have him with us now. And he'll be out there that day with our walk to kind of add to that. So yeah, here's my contact information. If you need anything, you can always call us, email me. You can go on our website, look at our plant lists and see what all we have growing. So I will open it up to questions. We have any in the chat, Josh, or?
Not yet. I just posted the question if there are any questions.
Yeah. Yes, of course.
First off, I noticed you didn't mention the willow oak. What is your thought?
So willow oaks do well here, but they are probably a bit more pH sensitive than the other oaks. So they do occasionally have some bright, you'll see like bright yellow trees in parking lots. Half the tree is green, half of it's yellow. If you go down to Lexington to the, I think it's called Kroger Stadium now, where they play football stadium in Lexington, UK. They had some that had like half and half yellow and green canopies from all of the soil pH issues there in the parking lot. So it's overall usually okay, but it can have more issues, more soil pH issues. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yes.
I was told that the tulip tree is not a good tree to plant that could fall on your house because it's got soft wood.
They are brittle compared to some other trees. So
Soft wood is room wood.
they can be quite brittle at times, especially as they get really, really old. They can drop large branches. That's a common complaint I have with that species. So I wouldn't put it real close to the house. Number one, it's a huge tree. You can't put it close to the house. It's best on the back of the property. If you got a lot of space, the big lawn, that'd be the best use. There are some cultivars that are more narrow. There's one called Arnold and Fastigiata that stay more narrow and upright. They're still going to become huge trees though. So they could get eyesore damage.
I like the old leaves. And I've got some volunteers, if you were, that would pull out my raised bed garden when they're like this and out there like this because I put them in pots.
They can get huge really fast. We planted one in our butterfly garden in 2012. It was maybe a little bit taller than I am, and it's now about 40, 50 foot tall. So they grow very fast.
So keep them away from the house.
Keep them away from the house. In your driveway, don't park your car in a storm. That sort of stuff. Yes.
Is UK, the program that they have for calorie repairs, is Boone County participating in that?
I have heard of some different programs. I'm not sure which one you're referring to. Oh, the bounty. We've been talking about doing that. The Northern Kentucky Urban Forestry Council is looking into hosting a calorie repair bounty. And so what she's, it's where, I think it's a program where they encourage people to remove their calorie repairs, and then I think they also provide tree sealings and stuff like that. I can't remember all the exact details.
From what I read, you bring in pictures of the cut down tree. You're doing it at your own expense, cutting it down, removing everything. You take pictures, they give you a plant to play. The one is native plant.
It's kind of it's more of a marketing push, but we definitely will probably have that up here soon. So we would tie it into Arbor Day. I can't remember who all.
I just want to know why you left the red maple.
Why I don't like red maples?
Yeah.
I do like them. I just think they're overplanted. They're everywhere. I mean, you run into problems when you plant things too much.
Mhm.
When there's too much of it, you become a monoculture. It's easy for a disease or an insect to go flying through them.
Mhm.
And I think that's got red maples is going to regret it when the spotted lanternfly starts rapidly expanding in our area. It was found in Cincinnati over at the zoo last year. They found 2 little insects separate from each other. And so that just means it's in our area now.
Yeah.
And we'll have tree trunks covered in spotted lanternfly. They'll be raining down honeydew on you like it's raining under your trees. You'll be able to be outside on your tree. It's going to be probably pretty bad. This is what we're having in Pennsylvania. Yes.
Is the red maple the tree that they attack the most?
They like maples, and red maples are very, very high on the list. They love Ailanthus the most, which is an invasive Asiatic tree, but red maples are right up there with Ailanthus.
So
Like
they
Ailanthus is
attack-
right here, red maple's like right next to it.
They would attack a Schwelder maple.
They will also use them too, yes. Pretty much all maples, they'll go for all maples. So if you have a lot of red maples, you might be regretting it. Sorry. I do like that autumn radiance, what I mentioned, because it's the first one to have fall color. It's very, very reliable. It's very long lasting and kind of glows.
That one's not sterile, is it? What, that autumn radiance?
I don't recall. Do you
It's
remember?
not a cross or anything?
No, it's straight species rubrum, but it's a selection. It came out of J. Frank Schmidt, I think. Yes.
Back on the spotted lanternfly, is there anything that can be done to help prevent that from getting to your trees? And then if they do arrive here this summer, then what can we spray to get rid of them?
There are some insecticides you can use, but it's not really going to be extremely effective. You're really going to have like professional level applications made. Imidacloprid has some effect, but that also affects other things. So it's probably not going to be something you
Will
can easily.
arborists have it at their disposal?
If they wanted to help treat, yes. Yeah,
Okay.
but it's really going to be so overwhelming. There's not going to be much you can do, unfortunately. Maybe a leaf blower. I don't know.
And,
I'm busy.
and those are the ones you said are affecting the maples?
They will affect maples, yes. So this year it'll take a couple years to build up numbers like that. Maybe in 4 or 5 years, we'll have them where we'll be like pulling our hair out with them. But this coming year, not yet. It'll take a couple years to start building populations up.
Is it gonna have the same effect as the ash borer?
No, it won't kill our trees. It will push trees over the edge that are already weak. So if it's a tree that's already declining, die back and all that, it will just help push it over the edge. It's not something that's going to outright kill your trees. But it will just make a mess. It'll look bad. It'll be like the cicadas, when the cicadas come that cover your trees and stuff. It'll be like that. So just make it a little bit unpleasant to be under a tree.
What bugs are you talking about?
The spotted lanternfly.
Spotted what?
Lanternfly.
It's a new bug.
An invasive coming in the area, there's a lot of.
It's got a
Down
little,
in Gallatin County, they were putting out traps last summer to see if they were in the area, looking to see if they were just in. I think they had found some in Indiana, not too far away.
they found them over in like Switzerland County, I think.
That's right across the river
Mhm.
where they're
Yeah.
testing.
They found one down in Cincinnati State.
Oh, great. See, where there's one, there's more. I mean, it didn't just spontaneously get here. It didn't fly from Philadelphia. So,
On the magnolias, tulip magnolia or Jane magnolia. Did I miss that one in your talk, or is that something that,
they're fine. They're beautiful trees. They do really well here. There's just so many magnolias. If I start on one, it's like door would never end. So, there's nothing wrong with them. And it's more shrubby and suckering. So it's a smaller one that you could use to do even almost like a screen. It's very dense and suckers and can kind of layer itself and make a nice big mountain shrubby tree. They bloom really nice with purple flowers, and they can rebloom in the middle of summer if we have enough rainfall. It's just, we would be here all night if I did everything I liked.
Yeah.
Probably 1,000 slides or something.
and then the Leonard Messel magnolia seemed to have a similar flower.
It is similar. It's two-toned. It has purple and like the pink kind of combined together. The other side is purple. So when the wind blows, you kind of see those different colors. But it's a very reliant plant. Very nice.
So like on the coloration of it, is the older tree species, are they just one color or are they dual colors
Which tree is that?
of the
The
magnolia?
tulip magnolia, which the old farm place that she grew up on had, they called it tulip tree. It was a larger tree, not the bush, in the backyard in southern Illinois. And she was trying to find one similar. And I'm assuming that was just these regular tulip magnolia. They do get pretty big.
So tulip tree or,
Well, that's what they're called it. I mean,
Not the yellow poplar.
okay, all right.
But
So
it
that's,
doesn't have the
all right.
waxy, it
So there's
doesn't
a
have the
cucumber.
waxy, it doesn't have the waxy, like when I went to Murray, they have the southern magnolia, so
Mhm.
they have the waxy leaves and the bigger flowers. And this has a tulip looking flower on it, but they were much lighter than anything that I've seen. They were it was more of a purple, but it wasn't a deep purple, like the light purple, like,
Were they blooming really early in the season? So,
yeah, it would bloom in the early April.
so it sounds like a saucer magnolia, Sulangiana. Because they were blooming the last few weeks here. Then they frozen just they weren't.
Well, see, and
They shrubby trees or real big, tall timber type things?
no, it wasn't a timberline.
Okay, probably a saucer magnolia, which is a Japanese hybrid.
But I know it's been planted by my grandmother in the early 1900s.
They can live a long time.
So it's just the coloration was different than anything. I've not seen a coloration like.
Sounds like it was one of the saucer magnolias. And there's so many varieties of that. There's older types that are around that you can't find anymore. We have one called Linnei that's got deep purple and pink. Almost sounds like what you're describing.
Yeah.
And it's kind of hard to find. We've got the arboretum. It blooms later than the other saucers. It kind of avoids the frost and freezes.
Yes, doing a Google search, tulip magnolia praise comes up with saucer magnolias.
Yeah.
So it's probably just a specific cultivar. It's been around for a long time that you remember.
I like the chinkapin oak like you do, but you have the dwarf chinkapin oaks.
We planted one. And it did not stay very small. It's becoming quite arborescent, tall. So we think we have a hybrid with it. So it'd be nice to have it, but we don't have the dwarf chinkapin.
How tall do the dwarfs get?
It's supposed to be a 10 to 20 foot tall.
Yeah.
Oak. So there's a chinkapin, which is like a small shrubby chestnut relative with the Ozark Mountains and all that. And then there's also the dwarf chinkapin oak, which stays smaller.
Do you know anybody that would sell those near here?
I do not. No, the dwarf chinkapin oak is pretty hard to find.
Okay.
Is that dwarf one grafted or how is that?
The dwarf chinkapin, it's just a natural occurring species. It just occurs in the Ozarks, so it's kind of a smaller version. Yeah,
You were talking about the evergreens that look like they're eating house, the wrong size evergreen. I have, it's on the northwest side of the house, but I only have about 10 feet space wise. I'd like something to put an evergreen there, but I don't want it to be too big, it's close to the neighbor's driveway. What would you recommend that wouldn't interfere with your foundation that could give you a good look and be a fair size?
a screen or something that's just kind of there.
The screening, yeah.
There are some more narrow varieties like steeplechase. They still get tall, but they're more skinny,
Uh-huh,
if you will.
uh-huh.
So it's I think it might be a Thuya plicata. Steeplechase, just a couple real skinny ones. You know,
Emerald green, arborvitae.
yeah, emerald green. Yeah, that's another small skinny one.
But you don't have to worry about the roots getting near your foundation or anything.
They're not going to affect it too much. You can do a sweet bay magnolia. There's a little one called Sweet Thing that stays small and dwarf.
A little sweet thing.
Sweet Thing's nice.
My neighbor cut down his trees because he was tired of breaking. So it'd be close to his driveway and I thought evergreens would be the most acceptable.
I would plant something like a catalpa that drops everything. That's how I am. I'll be like, I'll show you. Yes.
My backyard, it's on my property, but of course, San Juan Creek comes up, and there's a pin oak and a chinkapin oak. Probably just about this far apart. They're both higher than ceiling now. Would you take out the pin oak, let the chinkapin grow, or what?
Yeah.
Does it matter?
Yeah, pin oaks are just so much more common and they also break apart. Or they don't live as long.
Okay.
The red oak group is more prone to storm damage. 150 years is a good run for a red oak group. So pin oaks, northern red oaks, they fall apart really fast. Chinkapins will be much more, with more longevity, it'll be longer than it.
Okay.
Yep.
There's a lot of really beautiful big trees. Much like her, I have a small property. Do you have any recommendations for extra trees, but not trees she was talking about? Actually,
So something small.
dogwood or sort of the foundation of the house, that kind of stuff. Like the city property.
Right.
I love huge trees, but it's just not going to happen.
Right. So I didn't talk about crabbapple trees, so you can always do crabbapples. There's varieties now, they're out on sucker resistant rootstocks, so rootstocks that don't sucker as much. they're always, you know, a nice flowering tree with, you know, nice leaves and, you know, blooms. Some of the cherries, there's quite a few cherries out there that's might also work, as long as your soil is well drained. I mentioned the sweetback magnolias, they're not a big tree. I got some, they're semi-evergreen, so some years you have a lot of foliage. This past winter, it probably knocked all the foliage off because we were so cold around Christmas. I mean, there's lots of smaller stuff, you know, red buds too. Would be a native if you're looking for native versus non-native, and I mean, it's just really depends on what your focus would be.
For, trees to plant on the inside of a privacy fence. That would still show the fence. Like have a trunk that comes up to the top of the fence, then a canopy. It's a 6-foot tall fence.
And your canopy would be evergreen to add privacy, or?
Not necessarily, just something that's gonna stay, you know, it's not gonna get 50 feet tall.
Right. A lot of stuff I just mentioned to him would work. For that. Yes,
I have 2 Saguaro cypress in front of that house. And they've gotten so tall, they're kind of, you know, covered in the house.
yeah.
Can those be either transplanted or heavily pruned?
They probably, well, transplanting, no, they're not going to survive that. Heavily pruning them is also risky. It's kind of a marginally well adapted plant here. They get some blights and stuff to take them out usually. I would not go to anything extreme with that plant. We have a really stressful dry summer. You may lose it completely. So I wouldn't really just go out and prune it heavily. I think it would put it in, predispose it to being lost.
Probably not the best tree to plant, right?
It's not a variety that I would ever usually recommend, because I've seen them become beautiful trees and then suddenly one year just they get tons of light and die and just completely collapse. Probably likes a little bit cooler summer than what we have. Yeah, no problem. Any questions online, Josh?
How do
There's
we
a
get
thank
back to
you comment.
Is this recorded?
It is, yes.
How do we get back to it?
So we'll email everybody a link to
Oh,
our
okay.
YouTube recording of it. It'll be on YouTube. On our
Oh,
channel.
okay.
It'll always be there.
Yeah, okay, good.
Yep. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sign our sheet of that.